everyone! So today we're going to be talking about knitting needles, and in my last video I talked a lot about crochet hooks and kind of the ones I prefer, the pros and cons, and kind of gave some recommendations. Well, today I'm going to be talking about the different type of knitting needles, and what I mean by that is if you're new to knitting, you probably are thinking, why are there so many different needles and what are they all for? Because there's straight needle, double pointed needles, there's circular needles, there's also tiny little mini circular needles. I mean, there's so many different types of needles out there for knitting. It's kind of unbelievable how many options you have and what are they all used for? Do you really need to have every size of straight, every size of circular, and every size of double pointed needles? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to be talking about are straight knitting needles. These are the knitting needles you probably have seen on TV. You usually see the two needles, and that's what you see whenever you think of knitting. You probably think of straight needles. So straight needles are awesome for smaller projects. In my mind, when they worked flat, it works out very well because especially if you're not going past this needle with your stitches, you can work across. It's very quick. It's just these two needles. They're not too long. Straight needles are also great for you to learn how to knit on because they're just these needles. You have a very firm grip on them because the whole part of it is either wood, metal, or plastic. There's no flexibility like you would with a circular cord. And also I've used short circular needles and straight needles to do sleeves whenever the sleeves of a sweater are worked flat and then you end up sewing them on. And actually I ended up preferring the straight needles. I just felt like it worked up better, and I don't know, it's just personal preference. So straight needles I find are a little bit more difficult when you have a lot of stitches to use. So if you have, let's just say 100 stitches on this needle, it can be a little tight and there's more of a chance you could lose a stitch and drop it, and the next thing you know your stitch is unraveling, and if you're not sure how to fix that mistake, it can be very, very discouraging and kind of make you want to give up. I have to say though, my grandma actually used straight needles to do blankets, and I have no idea how she did it. She used extra long because you can actually buy longer straight needles. She bought the longest ones you could buy and she knitted like that her blankets. And in my mind, I could not do that. I would be dropping stitches left and right, but it is what she preferred. She hated circular needles. So as you're going to kind of see throughout this video, a lot of it comes down to preference. There's really no right or wrong way with needles. The only way you would struggle is if your pattern calls for circular needles because you're going to be joining it and you want to use straight needles, because obviously you can't join straight needles. But straight needles are really great whenever you're working something flat and it's maybe not as many stitches like for a blanket or something like that. That's a little too big. You could even make a pillow. Just know that the more stitches you add on your straight needles, the more bunched up they're going to be and the more likely you could drop a stitch. So just be careful on that. But other than that, straight needles are really great. Just remember they have to be worked flat. You cannot join straight needles. And maybe make sure you don't pick up a huge project that's going to have a lot of stitches on your needles. Alright, so now circular. So I brought two different kinds with me. These are the Clover and this is the Yarnology by Hobby Lobby. These are metal, these are bamboo. So what I'm going to say about circular needles, there is a huge pro with circular needles. You do not have to join your work with circular needles. And what I mean by that is a lot of times whenever you think of circular needles, you're thinking of maybe a hat or a sweater, something that is joined and worked in the round. But the beauty about circular needles is you can just work them flat. So you can just cast on your stitches, knit it, turn, don't join it, and keep on knitting. Kind of like, it's like one giant straight needle that's flexible and has a actual tip on each end. That's the difference. So circular, they are very easy to work with. You don't have to worry about losing another needle because you have both of your needles right here on the cord. And you can actually accommodate a lot more stitches with circular needles because the cords can go up so much. The longest cord I have in my kit, I believe, is 40 inches, which is made for a blanket. It's very long, very big, but you don't have to go that big. This is a 16-inch knitting needle circular, and this is what's most commonly used for hats. So you can join. So I have to say I'm a huge fan of circular. I used to hate them and I only use straight needles, but the more I've knitted, the more I've kind of grown. I have found that circular needles are very easy, and honestly, once you have the whole set, you can work straight projects in the round. You kind of have like the whole broad range. You don't have to buy every single size in straight because you have them in circular. That is the nice positive part of circular, but like I said, a lot of people out there don't like circular. They would rather use straight needles, and there is nothing wrong with that. Just find what you're comfortable with and then just run with it. Just know that if you're wanting to make a hat, you're definitely going to have to use circular, or you are going to have to use double pointed needles, which we will be talking about in just a moment. But I have to say, I've grown to love circular. They're very easy, and you can make pretty much anything if you have all the sizes. Anything you can imagine, you can pretty much make. Alright, so the last needles we're going to be talking about are double pointed needles. And this will have, I don't know what brand these are. For some reason with double pointed needles, I end up losing the packaging very easily. So I end up getting a baggie and using my label maker to say what size they are. So these are double pointed needles. So basically, this is what they look like. It's pretty much their name. They are double pointed. They have a tip at each end. And you get 5 to a kit, and why that is you will need usually 3 to 4 needles to create the circle, and then you always have to have one needle to actually be doing your work and making the stitches with. So you can use these. Most commonly are used for socks. Socks are very small. With circular needles, you can only go so small with the actual ring. It can only hold so many stitches. What I mean by that is if your hat only calls for 20 stitches, your little circular needles are not going to be able to hold that few of stitches because the cord is too long. So anytime you start shrinking your hat, like if you're going to be finishing off your hat and you have to decrease a lot at the crown, you will begin to notice that your circular needles will start to bunch and you won't be able to actually work in the round anymore. You actually will kind of get stuck because you can't actually move your needles anymore because it's too small. That's where you have to bring in the double pointed needle, because you're actually able to make the circle as small as you're able, as small as you want. There's been patterns out there where you literally start with 2 stitches and you grow it into a circle, you keep growing it, and you start off with double pointed needles. Double pointed needles, there is no minimum. You can start with just a few stitches and grow it to be as big as you want. Eventually you will have to put it on circular needles just because you can only hold so many on your double pointed needles. But for the most part, you can work there's no minimum with double pointed. There is a minimum with circular. Also with double pointed needles, you can make socks, you can make hats with them, anything in the round that will not exceed the limit, basically where your stitches are just falling off the double pointed needles. You can pretty much make anything you want with them. That is a positive. A lot of people do not like double pointed needles. My mom hates double pointed needles. She's gotten a lot better with them though because she's been really trying to work on it. They are very tricky at first because it's weird having a bunch of needles loose just in a circle and you're trying not to lose your stitches. It can be a little bit difficult, but once you master it, you'll see all the opportunities and what you can make with it. And it becomes a lot easier. The more you work in the round, the easier it gets with double pointed needles. I have found the first couple rounds are the hardest, and then after that you kind of have a fabric being made and it holds the needles together, making it more easy, and you won't lose a needle basically is what I'm saying. So those are the double pointing needles pros. Another thing I want to let you know is there are these really tiny little circular needles that people use for socks. Those are great if you're able to use them. A lot of people love them, a lot of people hate them. There's really no person out there that's like, they're okay. I guess maybe I'm kind of like that. I think they're fine. I've used them before. I don't love them. I feel like my hands have to be sitting a certain way, but they're not so uncomfortable where I couldn't do it. Some people, they find them so uncomfortable that they won't even try to finish the project. They'll literally rip the project out and try something else. I just find that it's a little bit uncomfortable, but I can get through it type thing. So those are definitely something you'd have to try and see for yourself, because like I said, people are pretty divided on the tiny little circular ones. They're either they love them or they hate them. But so that's kind of a just basic kind of comparing the different types of knitting needles out there. It can be so complicated when you start knitting because there's so many needles out there. And honestly, what I would recommend, if you are a fan of circular needles, buy yourself a nice kit or just slowly start buying each size. Why I say a kit is you can buy a kit that has all the sizes with all the different cords, and they're usually interchangeable, so you can just change out the cord if you need a longer cord, or you can change out the needle size. It's no big deal. With collecting every single size and cord length with knitting needles individually, it can kind of get a little bit complicated because you have them everywhere, or you might end up missing a size. But if you know there's only certain sizes you use, then definitely, if that works for you, perfect. But sometimes the kit just works out a little bit better because you have all the sizes, all the cords right there in front of you. And what's nice with circular is you don't have to have straight needles. You literally don't have to own a pair of straight needles if you don't want to, because you can do the exact same thing with circular as you can do with straight needles. So that's kind of why I recommend that. But if you hate circulars, then keep rocking your straight needles. That is totally fine. Whatever works for you, you should definitely do, because if you do what works for you, then you're going to become more comfortable with it, and you're going to want to learn new things and try different things. If you're really uncomfortable and you hate what you're working with, then you're just gonna kind of be like, I don't really want to do this. So definitely find what works for you and just run with it. But yes, I hope this video was helpful for you guys. Like I said, I just want to do a brief video just explaining the different ones, and so you can kind of have a little bit of a better understanding what is out there. So thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!